The storm had buried the mountains in silence when Ranger Eli Turner saw it. Massive paw prints circling the abandoned ranger cabin. But what stopped him cold wasn't the size of the tracks, it was where they ended. A huge grizzly lay sleeping in the snow, pressed against the cabin wall, as if guarding it. Bears didn't hibernate here. Not this high, not this late. Yet this one had come, chosen this place, and refused to leave. Inside that frozen cabin, Eli would soon discover why. And nothing could prepare him for it. The Alaskan wilderness was drowning in white when Eli Turner pressed his gloved hand against the frosted glass of the ranger outpost. The storm had been relentless for 3 days, wind howling through the pines like a living thing, swallowing every trace of sound. He had been alone for weeks now, miles from the nearest town, keeping the mountain trails closed for the season. Isolation didn't bother him. He'd lived his life chasing silence, but tonight that silence felt wrong. He had noticed the first sign an hour before dusk. Tracks, massive, deep, unnaturally close to the cabin. At first glance, they looked like bear prints, but the size made his breath hitch. They were nearly twice the span of his hand, pressed deep into the crusted snow. He had followed them with his flashlight, watching as they snaked from the tree line straight toward his cabin, and then stopped. The light beam trembled as he followed the path with his eyes. There, half buried in snow, the outline of something enormous slumped against the wooden wall of the storage shed just a few yards from the cabin. The shape didn't move, didn't even twitch. Eli stepped outside, the door groaning behind him as he entered the storm. The air was razor-sharp, slicing through his coat. Every breath came out as a ghostly cloud. The snow reached his knees by the time he got close enough to see it clearly, and his heart almost stopped. A grizzly bear, easily 10 feet from nose to tail. Its fur was rimed with ice, snow piled thick over its back. Its breathing slow but steady. It wasn't dead. It was sleeping. That made no sense. Bears hibernated in dens, hidden deep within caves or hollow trees. Never out in the open, never in the killing wind. Yet here it was, lying against the wall of his old supply shed, as if it had chosen that exact spot for a reason. Eli's beam swept across the snow near the bear and froze on something else. Smaller prints. Human ones. The tracks led from the forest to the shed door. 2 sets, a man and a child. Maybe he felt a sudden rush of cold that had nothing to do with the weather. The shed door stood slightly ajar, half buried under a drift of snow. From inside came a dim glow, an old battery lantern he didn't remember leaving on. He took a step forward. The bear exhaled, a low rumble vibrating through the snow like distant thunder. And for the first time in years, Eli Turner felt fear bloom in his chest. Eli's breath came out in short bursts, clouding the air as he crouched near the shed. The bear's body rose and fell rhythmically, its fur thick with frost. It looked ancient, like something carved from a mountain itself. He watched for several long seconds, trying to convince himself this was normal, just a wild animal caught in the storm, seeking warmth. But deep down, he knew better. The grizzlies in this region were ghost-like this time of year, hibernating miles away. For one to be here, sleeping exposed in blizzard conditions, meant something was wrong. Eli turned his flashlight toward the human tracks again. Snow had started to fill them in, but he could still make out small boot prints beside larger ones. The pair had come from the West Trail, a path closed weeks ago after an avalanche warning. No one should have been out there. His gut tightened. He inched closer to the shed, every step careful, measured. The bear didn't stir. Its head rested near the wall, nostrils flaring slightly with each breath. A faint vibration rolled through the wood, as if its very presence pulsed into the ground. When Eli reached the door, he hesitated. The wind hissed through the eaves, making the lantern inside flicker faintly. His gloved fingers brushed the handle. It was frozen stiff. With slow, deliberate pressure, he eased it open just enough to peek through the crack. At first, all he saw was the glow of the lantern, sitting on the floor amid scattered snow. Then his light caught the corner of a small backpack half buried under a tarp. He stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and old fuel. His flashlight swept across the cramped space. Broken tools, ropes, an overturned stool. Then it landed on a bright flash of color beneath the workbench. A red mitten, small, the kind a child would wear. He froze. Eli knelt and picked it up, his breath trembling. The mitten was stiff, almost frozen solid. Beside it lay a small thermos. The name Maya scrawled across the metal in faded marker. His heart sank. He'd heard that name earlier that week on the radio. A rescue alert from the nearby town of Copper Ridge. A man and his daughter, missing after their snowmobile broke down near the Ridge Trail. The search had been called off 2 days ago because of worsening weather. Eli's stomach twisted. He turned toward the far side of the shed. There, the snow near the wall looked disturbed, pushed aside by something heavy. Drag marks led toward the bear's sleeping form outside. He moved closer, his flashlight trembling as it traced the marks. They stopped just short of the wall, right where the bear lay pressed against it. For a split second, the impossible thought crossed his mind. Was the bear lying there? Because of them? A faint sound broke the silence. A weak creak, like ice cracking. Eli spun, the light sweeping the interior again. And then he heard it clearly. A cough. Soft. Human. He dropped to his knees, pressing his ear against the floorboards. The sound came again, muffled, distant, but unmistakably real. There was space beneath the shed. Heart pounding, he tore away at the frozen planks near the back corner until a small gap appeared. Cold air rushed upward, and along with it, the faintest whimper. "Hello?" he whispered. No answer. Just the steady, slow rumble of the bear outside and the haunting echo of that small, fragile sound. Eli's flashlight beam trembled over the opening. What he saw made every instinct in him scream to run, but his legs refused to move. For a moment, Eli just stared into the black gap beneath the shed floor, unable to breathe. The wind screamed outside, battering the wooden walls, but down here, under the boards, the sound was faint, distant, muted by snow and earth. His flashlight trembled in his grip, its thin beam cutting through the narrow opening, illuminating what lay below. A pair of eyes blinked back at him. They were small, glassy, half-lidded, belonging to a child. Eli's breath caught. Hey, it's okay," he said softly, forcing his voice steady. "Don't move, sweetheart." He ripped away another plank, his gloves slipping on the frost. The hole widened, revealing a small pocket of space beneath the shed, likely an old crawl area once used for storage. The beam of his flashlight found a girl, no older than 8, huddled against a collapsed wooden beam. Her face was pale blue, lips trembling, breath shallow. She wore a heavy coat torn at the shoulder, and her right hand was bare, her red mitten missing. "Maya," Eli breathed, her head tilted slightly, eyes flickering toward him. He didn't wait. Pulling off his gloves, he reached down through the gap, ignoring the sting of cold biting into his fingers. "I'm gonna get you out, okay? You just hold still." But she wasn't alone. As Eli adjusted his light, he saw a larger figure slumped nearby, a man half buried under a sheet of snow and splintered boards. The beam glinted off a cracked snowmobile helmet. The man's chest rose, barely perceptible. Alive. Eli swallowed hard. He had no radio signal out here. The last storm had fried the tower 2 miles east. The emergency beacon in the cabin could send an alert, but it required a clear line to the sky. And stepping outside that far with the bear pressed against the wall would be suicide. He needed to think. Fast. "Maya," he whispered again, voice barely audible. "Can you hear me? Is her dad breathing?" The girl nodded weakly, a small shudder running through her body. "Good. I'm gonna get you both out." He yanked off his parka and shoved it down through the hole, covering her trembling frame. She was freezing, beyond hypothermia territory. He'd seen frostbite before, but this was worse. If he didn't move fast, the cold would claim them both before dawn. Outside, a low rumble vibrated through the wall. Eli froze. The bear. The sound deepened, a long exhale followed by the heavy shift of weight. Snow fell from the roof in clumps. The wood creaked. He turned off his flashlight instantly, holding his breath. Through the crack in the door, he could just make out the beast's enormous silhouette shifting in its sleep. Steam rose from its nostrils in soft bursts. For a moment, its head lifted, sniffing the air, then slowly lowered again. Eli's pulse hammered so loud he was certain it could hear it. Minutes passed before he dared move. He forced himself to whisper through the gap again. "You have to stay quiet, Maya. Do you understand?" Her voice came out broken, almost lost in the wind. "It's warm." He frowned. "What?" She pointed weakly upward, toward the wall above her. Toward the bear. "The big thing. It keeps us warm." Eli's blood ran cold. The bear's body was pressed tight to the outer wall, its immense bulk insulating the shed from the brutal wind. The snow piled on its back acted like a barrier, trapping a small pocket of warmth inside the crawl space. That's why she was still alive. The beast was unknowingly shielding them from a storm. He had to work quickly before that fragile balance shattered. Using his axe, Eli pried loose more of the frozen boards. The metal bit into his palms, but he didn't care. Every second mattered. He widened the opening enough to pull the girl through, lifting her into his arms. Her body was stiff, feather-light. He wrapped her in his coat and held her close, feeling her faint pulse against his chest. Then he turned back for the man. The father's leg was pinned under debris, his boot twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood had frozen around the wound, dark and thick. Eli tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy. He braced his shoulder against it, straining until pain shot up his back. The wood cracked, but didn't budge. "Come on," he hissed through gritted teeth. He finally managed to wedge his axe under and lever it just enough to free the man's leg. When the body shifted, a low groan escaped the man's lips, proof of life, fragile but real. Eli wrapped his arm around the man's torso, dragging him toward the gap. His breath burned in his throat, frost collecting in his beard. He could feel the temperature dropping again, each second colder than the last. He just managed to pull the man halfway out when another sound shattered the stillness. A deep growl, the kind that came from a creature realizing it was no longer alone. Eli froze. His flashlight trembled as he slowly turned toward the door. A massive shadow shifted beyond the crack. The bear's head lifted fully this time, its breath fogging the air like smoke. Its eyes caught the faint lantern light, golden, ancient, intelligent. And it was awake. The bear's massive frame shifted, snow cascading from its back in heavy clumps. Eli didn't move. The child in his arms whimpered softly, and he clamped his gloved hand over her mouth. The air inside the shed felt charged, electric. He could hear his own pulse pounding inside his ears. The creature turned its head toward the door. Its nose twitched, drawing in the scent of human fear. For several seconds, everything hung in balance. The storm, the silence, the thin wall separating man from beast. Then, to Eli's disbelief, the bear lowered its head again. Its breathing slowed, deep and rhythmic. It wasn't hunting. It was staying. Still, Eli knew the danger was far from over. He laid Maya gently on the floor, wrapped tight in his coat, and crawled back to the opening to drag her father out completely. The man's skin was pale, waxy, his breathing shallow, like the faint rhythm of a clock about to stop. "Hang in there," Eli whispered, pulling him free from the last of the debris. "I've got you." He checked his watch light. Nearly 2 a.m. The temperature was dropping below -30. Without medical help, neither of them would last another hour. Eli looked at the emergency beacon mounted near the cabin's radio tower. It was maybe 50 yards away across open snow. If he could reach it and trigger the SOS signal, a rescue chopper might still reach them before dawn. But one wrong move could wake the bear and doom them all. He forced himself to breathe evenly. The bear's deep exhale rattled the shed wall. "Okay," he muttered under his breath. "We do this slow." He bundled Maya and her father together in his parka and an old sleeping bag, layering extra cloth from the shelves over them. Then, quietly, he gathered the few supplies that might help: rope, a tarp, and the emergency flare he'd kept for years. He needed to move them to the cabin, but even one crunch of ice could bring disaster. Eli eased open the door, the hinge creaking faintly. The bear was still there, no more than 6 feet away, its fur glistening under the dim lantern light seeping through the snow. Its massive head rested on its paws, breath pluming in steady rhythm. He stepped into the night. The cold slammed into him like a wall. His boots sank deep, snow crunching underfoot despite his effort to stay silent. Each step was torture, a slow, deliberate dance with death. He made it a few yards before his heart lurched. The bear's ear twitched. He froze, didn't breathe, didn't blink. A gust of wind howled through the trees, and the creature settled again, the noise masking his movement. Eli exhaled shakily and pressed forward. He reached the beacon tower and flipped open the control box, his fingers trembling violently. The system was ancient, analog, powered by a backup generator that needed manual priming. He turned the crank, each click echoing in the frozen stillness. When the red light finally blinked on, it felt like hope itself had ignited in the snow. A low radio hum followed, the weak signal flickering through static. Station, repeat. Who is this? Eli pressed the transmitter close. Ranger Turner. Emergency code blue. 2 survivors, hypothermic, active bear near structure. Coordinates transmitting. The line crackled. Copy, signal weak, stand by for extraction. He could barely hear the rest as wind swallowed the sound. But it was enough. Help was coming. He turned back toward the shed. The snow was falling heavier now, thick flakes swirling like ghosts. Through the blur, he could just make out the shape of the bear beside the wall, still lying there, its massive form half buried again. Beyond it, the faint flicker of lantern light showed where Maya and her father lay. Eli started moving, careful, steady. He made it halfway when a deep, guttural sound stopped him cold. The bear's head lifted, fully awake this time. It rose slowly, towering above the snow, steam rising from its fur like smoke from a forge. Its eyes caught the glint of the beacon's red light and fixed on Eli. He froze, his body screaming to run, but his mind knowing movement meant death. The beast sniffed the air again, then took one slow, deliberate step toward him. Eli backed away, whispering under his breath, "Easy, easy, big guy." Another step. The snow cracked beneath its paw. Eli's hand went to his belt, fingers brushing the flare gun. He didn't want to use it. The light or noise might spook it, or worse, make it attack. But the bear wasn't charging. It was circling, slowly, methodically, like it was hurting him. The snow whipped harder, visibility dropping to almost nothing. For a moment, Eli lost sight of it entirely. Then came a sound, a deep exhale behind him. He spun, flare raised. The bear wasn't attacking. It had returned to the shed. Through the haze of snow, Eli watched in disbelief as the massive creature lay down again beside the wall, pressing its body close, curling as if to shelter the structure once more. It wasn't hunting. It was protecting. The truth hit him like a physical blow. The beast had stayed through the storm, guarding those trapped inside. By sleeping there, it had shielded them from the wind, from death itself. He stumbled back to the shed and dropped to his knees beside Maya and her father. Both were breathing, barely. The heat from his body and the bear's shared warmth had kept them alive. Then, faint and distant, the low hum of rotor blades cut through the blizzard. Eli looked up, blinking through the flurries. The rescue chopper's searchlight sliced the storm open like dawn breaking through night. He triggered the flare, the red light bursting into the sky. The bear stirred again, lifting its head toward the glow. For one suspended moment, man, nature, and storm all seemed to hold their breath. Then, as the helicopter descended, the creature turned toward the forest. Without a sound, it walked into the snow, vanishing between the trees, its massive form swallowed by white. Eli watched until it disappeared completely. Only then did he collapse beside the survivors, whispering through chattering teeth, "Thank you." Hours later, Eli sat in the small mountain clinic, his hands wrapped in gauze and his face blistered from frostbite. Maya and her father were being treated in the next room. Doctors called it a miracle. Their body temperatures had dropped so low that, by all logic, they should have died hours before rescue arrived. Yet somehow, their vital signs had clung to life, preserved just enough to bring them back. When a paramedic asked how he'd found them, Eli didn't have an answer that made sense. He just said something kept them alive. The storm cleared by dawn. From the window, he could see the mountains stretching endlessly under the pale morning sun. The rescue team had gone back to recover their gear, but what they reported made every hair on his neck stand. The snow around the old shed was flattened in a wide circle. Massive prints pressed deep into the ice, forming a perfect ring around the structure. Inside the circle, the snow was untouched. Peaceful. Protected. No one could explain it. No sign of aggression. No broken boards. No claw marks. Just those enormous tracks leading away toward the tree line and then disappearing. When Maya woke, she told him she dreamt of something warm pressing against the walls while she slept. "I thought it was the wind," she said quietly. "But it was breathing." Eli didn't correct her. He couldn't. Weeks later, when his hands had healed enough to work again, he returned to the ranger cabin. The shed still stood at the edge of the clearing, half buried in snow. He walked the perimeter slowly, feeling that same chill crawl up his spine. The silence was absolute. No wind, no birds, no movement. And yet, in the stillness, he could feel something. He paused, looking out toward the dense line of pines where the bear had vanished. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, faintly, a single puff of white mist rose between the trees, like the echo of a breath in the cold. Eli blinked, and it was gone. Somewhere in the heart of that frozen wilderness, a giant still wandered, bound to a mystery older than reason, an instinct not of hunger, but of guardianship. And on certain nights, when the snow falls thick and the wind dies to silence, the mountain holds its breath as if listening for something that never left.